Hosting your own game servers for you and your friends to play together can be a blast, but I've noticed that hosting your own servers is usually one, if not both of these things, either really expensive or really complicated. But today we're going to look at a solution that might be able to solve both of those problems, meaning that it's going to be cheap and relatively easy to use. By using an old computer that's destined for a landfill, or better yet, just using one that you have already laying around, and by buying a cheap license to a software called AMP, I'm confident that we can solve both of these problems. AMP, or Application Management System, is basically a one-stop shop for application and game hosting that makes it relatively easy to use and allows you to host multiple games at the same time. I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but right now, let's look into what the current solutions are for hosting your own game servers. What we're going to do is we're going to look at one of the regularly available and popular Minecraft hosting services and figure out how much that costs to use. And then we'll set that cost as the upper end of our budget for building our own solution. First, let's find out how expensive it is to host in a convenient manner a single Minecraft server. So looking at Hostinger, which is one of the more popular self-hosting Minecraft server softwares out there, we see that we can get a single server for about $7.50 a month. That seems pretty affordable, but if we dig into that price a little bit, one, we learn it's a sale price, so you only get that for a temporary amount of time. And two, you only get that price if you pay for a year at a time, which will run you about $90. Importantly, that $90 does not include any game server backups, which I consider to be pretty essential in the event that something goes wrong, you need to roll back to previous settings. If you do want to add the backup functionality, you're looking at spending about $162 for a single year of a single Minecraft instance. While that might not seem bad, I'm confident we can beat it. So the Hostinger option gives us 2 CPU cores, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and 100 gigabytes of storage. That's not amazing, but it will probably get you through a single instance. Notably, this also doesn't cover scenarios where you might want 2 Minecraft servers. Maybe you and your friends want to relive your COD glory days by hosting some Modern Warfare 2 servers and just having some fun. Maybe you want to run V Rising or Terraria or Left 4 Dead 2 or one of dozens of other games that AMP lets you run. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that $162 price point and set that as the upper limit of our budget to self-host our own solution. We're going to need 2 things. The first thing is an AMP license. So for now, all I'm going to say is that it's $10. So we have $150 more or less to find a computer that has at least 2 cores, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and 100 gigabytes of storage. I think that is more than doable. Now, if you're looking to host 4, 5, 6, 7 different games all at the same time, this is going to affect the decision for the specs that you need in the computer that you're looking for. If you're looking for maybe running 1 to 2, maybe 3 games concurrently, you're probably okay with a 4-core system that has 8 gigabytes of RAM and a decent amount of storage, probably at least 120 gigabytes. You'll also want to make sure that you have gigabit Ethernet, as making sure that you have fast, reliable internet to the server is really important for reducing in-game latency and lag for the people who are connected to it. If you're looking at running 5, 6, 7 instances, you're going to want to find a system that has probably 6, maybe 8 cores and at least 16 gigabytes of RAM, and we're shooting for maybe 512 gigabytes of storage just to make sure that we're okay. The real trick here is to look locally. On Facebook Marketplace, there are tons of options that I was able to find in this price point. I also happen to live in a town next to a university that has a surplus program. So every few years they cycle out their old computers and sell them dirt cheap to the community. You can find recycling shops. You can ask your friends or family if they just have an old rig laying around that they don't use anymore. The point is, this is definitely doable. Here are some options that I found locally on Facebook Marketplace that are well within our budget and give us the specs that we need to run at least a couple instances of games. My biggest piece of advice here is just to keep an eye out for good deals. eBay and other local sources are also huge benefits in addition to Facebook Marketplace. If you have time, take some time to maybe wait a week, 2 weeks, and just check in every day, see what's going on, send out some offers to people, and just be patient with it. I found a rig locally for $200, which I know is out of budget, but hear me out. It came with an 8-core CPU, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and a 512 gigabyte PCIe NVMe drive. What I did was I took that 32 gigabytes of RAM out and I threw it in my home server, and then I put 16 gigabytes of RAM back in. So I think it's more than fair to say that the computer and the rig that I have is within the $150 budget that we had left over. After you get your computer, you're going to want to take some time to clean everything up. Dust it out, make sure that everything looks nice and that the fans spin properly. You'll also want to do some digital cleanup. You'll probably want to do a fresh install or factory reinstall of Windows and make sure that Windows 11 is updated to a current version for the security benefits. You'll also want to plug that computer into your router via Ethernet. As I mentioned earlier, having a stable wired connection will go a long way to making sure that the gameplay experience on your server is what it should be. It is worth noting that after our initial setup, you won't even need a keyboard, a mouse, or a monitor plugged into this machine, because after the initial setup, everything can be accessed on other computers in your network via a web browser, making it really easy to manage. That means that once we're done setting everything up, you can just tuck your computer in a corner to let it run its services. I also didn't bother installing any other pieces of software, any new browsers or anything like that. I have OBS on here just to get some footage, but I want to run this system lightweight so that the majority of its resources can be used for running game servers. Now we're getting into the real meat and potatoes of this video. AMP. AMP is easy to install and set up on both Windows and Linux systems. I'm going to walk through the entire setup here, so don't be afraid if you've never done this kind of thing before. You can even do the initial setup and install without purchasing a license key, just to make sure that everything works and that you're comfortable with the software before you commit to buying. It supports all of the most popular self-hosted game servers, things like Minecraft, Terraria, V Rising, Arma 3, and dozens more. And the community is actively working on increasing this compatibility so that more and more games can be hosted on their platform. Additionally, they do have resources for particularly savvy users to start creating their own compatibility or instances for games that aren't officially supported. My favorite thing about AMP is that it is a one-time purchase. In a world full of subscription models, software as a service, and predatory pricing, payment plans, all that stuff, it's nice and refreshing to see something that is just sold for a price forever. AMP seems to be committed to doing this over the long term, so I have a reasonable level of confidence that they won't just rip the rug out from under us in the future and require a subscription. The starter edition at just $10 lets you have 5 instances running at the same time with up to 3 panel users, meaning that 3 people can configure and manage the management panel concurrently. If you need additional features like running more games at a time, more panel users, or you're doing some sort of large-scale enterprise deployment of this, there are other license editions of this for you, but we're just going to stick with the starter at this time. If you do need to upgrade in the future, that option is there also. I'm going to be running through how to set up AMP on Windows. If you're curious about installing it on Linux, I'm going to leave a link down below to Hardware Haven's video that he did on AMP, where he goes through a Linux installation, but I'm just going to stick to Windows for now. Before we get into installing AMP, we do need to take care of one dependency first. That's Docker. So if you don't know what Docker is, it's basically a way to run super light versions of operating systems without much overhead. You don't need to know all of the technical information around Docker to get things set up. I'm going to walk you through it right now. The first thing you're going to want to do is go to the Docker website and download Docker Desktop for Windows. Once the installer is downloaded, go ahead and launch it and go through the setup wizard. If prompted, go with WSL2 instead of Hyper-V. If you aren't prompted to do that, don't worry about it. Once the installation wizard is done, it's going to prompt you to reboot your PC. Go ahead and do that now. After reset, you're likely going to be prompted to update or install the Linux subsystem for Windows. This will happen through a command prompt. Go ahead and do that. If you miss the prompt to do this, go ahead and open your own terminal or command prompt and type in the prompt wsl.exe space -- update, and then hit enter. Let that update do its thing. That's just installing some of the tools that Docker needs to run correctly. Once this is updated, make sure that you have Docker Desktop open and that the Docker engine is running. Now we can move on to the installation of AMP. As before, let's go to their website and just scroll down until you see the big green Install Now button. Make sure that you get the Windows desktop version of the downloader and installer. After the installer is downloaded, go ahead and pop into it and go through the installation setup. I tend to like to keep things lightweight and simple, so I just use the typical setup. If you're curious about the other ones, your use case needs it, feel free to toy around with those. When you hit the install button, you will be prompted to give AMP permissions to edit things on your drive. Go ahead and give this permission. It is also likely going to pop up with prompts for a few other things. It's just installing dependencies like Git. These will likely pop up in command prompt windows, but this is not a cause for concern. Just keep a half an eye on this installation and make sure that you're giving the permissions necessary. Click Finish when everything is done, and then you'll go into the AMP Instance Manager. Here, you're going to set a username and password. Make sure that you choose a secure password and that you remember both the username and password. Since I'm just setting things up for instructional purposes, I'm just keeping my user as admin and I'm setting a simple, easy to remember password that I will change later. Once you're ready, click Continue Installation and wait until AMP is fully downloaded and installed. Once the login screen shows up, go ahead and log in. Click Next to continue your setup, and here it will prompt you to activate your license through an AMP key. If you have that now, go ahead and register here. If you haven't purchased a key yet, I'll show you how to activate it a little bit later. Clicking Next, I just chose the standalone installation. The other installation methods are if you are running AMP across multiple computers or have a more complicated setup. Next, you're going to be prompted to share some of your data. I personally don't like sharing data that I don't absolutely have to, so I deny all of this optional data reporting. Shout out to Qcoders, by the way, for including a deny all button here at the bottom. Love that. After hitting Next, you'll be prompted to set up a secure login device or two-factor authentication. I highly recommend taking the time to set these up, but I'm going to skip this for now just to get to the more interesting stuff for this video. At this point, you'll be prompted to restart AMP, so go ahead and do that. Once it's restarted, log in again, and this time you'll be taken to the dashboard. Now, there are only two more things that we need to do before we can be done configuring things directly on this machine. The first thing is to get your IP address for that machine. To do this, go to your command prompt and type in the command ipconfig and then hit enter. You're looking specifically for your IPv4 address, and make note of that somewhere. As a note, I would strongly recommend going into your router settings and setting this device to have a static IP address. That way, if there's a power outage or disconnection reconnects from your network, it doesn't randomly get assigned a different IP address, ruining some of the configurations of your game servers. The second thing that you need to make sure to do is that AMP and Docker can talk to each other. The same details I'm going to go over can be found in a different knowledge base article that I will also have linked in the description down below. As a note, the user and group settings that we're going to get into here in a second are only native to Windows 11 Pro, Server, and Education editions, but not to Windows 11 Home. If you have Windows 11 Home, I'm going to link below a different article to some resources that people have created so that you can still get that user and group management on Windows 11 Home. First, open the Start menu and type the command compngmt.msc to open computer management. This is if you're on Windows 11 Pro. If you're on Home, use the workaround in the article to view the users and groups. Expand local users and groups and select groups. Double-click the Docker users and click Add. In the Enter the object's names to select section, type Network Service. Click OK to close out of all windows and reboot Windows. Once you get back into Windows, log into the AMP panel and navigate to Configuration, Instance Deployment, Networking, and disable the quote, Use Host Networking for new containers. On this same page, you'll want to change the default AMP IP binding to 0.0.0.0. Next, navigate to Configuration, Instance Deployment, Deployment Defaults, and enable Create in Docker Containers. On this page, set the default auth server to be http://host.docker.internal:8080. At this point, you successfully got Docker and AMP installed and working and have set up remote access management. So this is me a few days later editing some of this footage, and I realized that I never showed you how to actually do the remote management. So earlier when we got the IPv4 address, what you're going to do is on any computer in your network, you're going to enter a browser, and in the browser search bar, you're going to type in that IP address, :8080, and hit enter, and that is how you access the remote management panel for AMP. I would recommend keeping this computer still connected to a monitor, keyboard, and mouse just to make sure that you can get through the rest of the configuration without running into any issues or needing it to troubleshoot. Now the real fun begins.
This is where the fun begins.
Creating an instance and making a game server. Creating an instance does require you to have an AMP license, so now is a good time to go and get that, and I'll show you how to activate it right now. Once you have your license, go to the management panel, go to Configuration, Instance Deployment, Deployment Defaults, License Key, and paste your license key in that spot. While you're poking around in the settings, I also recommend going to the system settings and updating the scheduler time zone to be whatever time zone that you're in. Now, go back to instances and you're ready to start setting things up. I'm gonna go ahead and walk through creating a Terraria server. I would do Minecraft, but I have never owned Minecraft and don't feel like buying it, and I already have Terraria. As a note, you need a Steam account that does have Terraria in its library. What I opted to do was to create a separate Steam account just for the games that I'm hosting, and as I need to, for the games that require it, I'll just wait for a sale or something like that and buy the games that are required that I want to host servers for. Note, this is not required for every game, but it is required for Terraria. First, you're going to want to hit the Create Instance button, and then in the top left, you're going to want to select the instance that you want to create. So I'm going to scroll down and go ahead and select Terraria. I also like to keep the rest of the settings as default of starting this instance on boot so that when AMP boots up, it will automatically start that instance. And I also like to leave the after creation setting set to update and start always as its default. Once you've got this page configured, go ahead and hit Create Instance. Once you've got the instance created, you're going to want to hit the little green cube in the bottom right of that instance to configure it. In this configuration menu, go ahead and hit Start. You will be prompted with a few things. One of them is logging in with your Steam account. So go ahead and enter your Steam information here, and then it will also prompt you for a Steam guard code. After this is done, it's going to run some initialization, make sure everything is up to date, and reserve the space that it needs. This process can take a little while, so just kind of let it run in the background while you're doing other things. Once it's done, your server will be live, and you can go ahead and connect to it from any computer on your local network. You can do that by going into Terraria and entering the IP address that you find in the management portal under the Terraria instance. In the case that I'm showing here, that is 192.168.0.123. After you enter the IP address, also enter the port, which in this case is port 7778. Once you enter that information, you should be able to sign into this world and get to playing. As a note, you can change the configurations for what your world in your Terraria instance looks like. Just go to the configuration and Terraria settings to see what you can change and make those changes. Right now, it is not configured for people on different networks, like your friends in a different house, different state, different part of the world will not be able to connect to it yet. That requires a little bit of port forwarding, which we're going to get into now. In order to port forward, go into your router settings and look for any NAT options. Once you get into the NAT configuration, create a new port forwarding rule where the source IP and the source port are the IP address and port of your game server. Again, you can find this in AMP. In the server settings, it is the connection information. Then set the external facing port that you want users to be able to use to connect to and save the rule like that. Now, from a different network, you should be able to enter the public IP address that your computer is on. I'll have a what's my IP address link below so that you can figure that out and just have users connect to that via entering that IP address and then the port that you just opened on your router, and then they should be able to access your game instance. So hopefully you've been able to follow along with everything that's been going on. I know in the beginning that I said that it was simple, and trust me, once you have it deployed and once you have it working, it is simple to manage multiple games all at once. So now you have a game server that you can host for your friends. You don't have to pay a subscription. You can use it for multiple years. You can host different games all at once. You can do your own backups. You can dive into more configurations. It's really a cool piece of software, and I hope that it's worked for you, and I hope that you can have some fun with it. If you thought this video was interesting or helpful, please consider subscribing and leaving a like on this video, and also leave a comment for some of the games that you're hoping to host with this, or if you've run into any particular issues, maybe we can help each other out. But as always, I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.